Hello, here I am again in the name of the sovereign creator of heaven and earth, the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm continuing, as I promised at the end of last video, with an evaluation of the Westcott and Hort theory. The third story that was built upon the false foundation and the equally false first and second two stories was conflation. Take A and B, join them together, get AB. AB is a conflation, all right? If you are not familiar with that, sorry, dear me. Hort's whole case against the Textus Receptus, under this heading, that is conflation, was based upon just 8 examples taken from 2 Gospels, Mark and Luke, 4 each. Now, to characterize a whole text for the whole New Testament on the basis of 8 examples is foolish, not to use stronger language. Colwell stated the problem well, quote, no text or document is homogeneous enough to justify judgment on the basis of part of its readings for the rest of its readings. This was Hort's Achilles' heel. He is trying to say here that since these 8 conflate readings occur in the Syrian text, that's the Byzantine text, that text as a whole is a mixed text. If a manuscript or text lacks these readings, it is in its other readings a witness to a text antecedent to mixture. Westcott and Hort state this fallacy very clearly in their argument for the importance of the evidence of a document as over against readings. And now he quotes from Hort. This is a quote from Hort. Where then one of the documents is found habitually to contain these morally certain, or at least strongly preferred readings, and the other habitually to contain their rejected rivals, we can have no doubt first that the text of the first has been transmitted in comparative purity, and that the text of the second has suffered a comparatively large corruption. And next, that the superiority of the first must be as great in the variations in which internal evidence of readings has furnished no decisive criterion, as in those which have enabled us to form a comparative appreciation of the two texts. End quote from Hort. And the emphasis, by the way, was Colwell's. Now Colwell continues, this would be true if we knew that there was no mixture involved, and that manuscripts and texts were rigorously homogeneous. Everything we have learned since Hort confirms the opposite position. End quote from Hosker, or Colwell, sorry. Okay, it has been generally supposed and stated that there are many other examples, which there aren't. Thus, Harrison said, another objection was the paucity of examples of conflation. Hort cited only 8, but he could have given others. That's false. Kenyon and Lake made the same claim. But where are the other examples? Why does not Harrison or Kenyon or Lake produce them? Because they can't. They couldn't. Because there are very few that have the required phenomena. Kenyon did refer in passing to An Atlas of Textual Criticism by E.A. Hutton, which he says, as Kenyon said, contains added examples of conflation. Okay, I myself got a hold of a copy, and I examined it with great care. And what I'm saying now, I myself verified in that book. That is Hutton's book, The Atlas. Upon inspection, the central feature of the 125-page work proves to be a purportedly complete list of triple variant readings in which in the New Testament, where the Alexandrian, Western, and Byzantine texts are pitted against each other. Hutton adduced 821 instances in the whole New Testament exhibiting the required phenomena. Out of all that, a few cases of possible, quote, Syrian conflation, aside from Hort's 8, may be called, such as in Matthew 27:41, John 18:40, Acts 20:28, Romans 6:12. 70 years ago, a Hortian might have insisted that John 10:31 also has a Syrian conflation. But now that Papyrus 66 moves the Syrian reading back to 200 AD, a different interpretation is demanded. Okay. I didn't check Hutton, okay? So his list may well be open to considerable question. It's possible. But if we may take it at face value for the moment, for the sake of the argument, it appears that the ratio of Alexandrian Western Byzantine triple variants to possible Syrian conflation, the Byzantine conflation, is about 100 to 1. Did you get that? 100 no to 1 possible. In other words, for every instance where the Syrian text is possibly, you have to prove it, okay, but possibly built on the neutral and Western text, there are 100 where it is not. Obviously, Hort was dishonest. His use of conflation was absolutely dishonest. 100 to 1. For every one where it might be, there are 100 where it was not. Okay, moving on, that raises another problem. If the Syrian text is eclectic, where did it get the material that is its private property? As Bergen observed at the time, it is, quote, impossible to conflate in places where codices B and Aleph and their associates furnish no materials for the supposed conflation. Bricks cannot be made without clay. All right, that should be obvious enough. Bricks cannot be made without clay. The materials actually existing are those of the traditional text itself, traditional Byzantine text itself. But there is another consideration which is fatal to Hort's purpose. He claimed that inversions do not exist, but they do. He himself, Hort himself, cited one of each kind. Codex D, representing the Occidental, the Western, conflates in John 5:37, and Codex B, representing the Alexandrian, conflates in Colossians 1:12 and 2 Thessalonians 3:4. Furthermore, there are a number of other conflations, not only on the part of D, B, and Aleph, but also the Western and Alexandrian text types. Please see Codex D for examples and evidence. That's, like I say, every one of my editions of the book, My Identity of the New Testament Text, except the first one in 77. Marcion, in the 2nd century, he conflated the Byzantine Western neutral readings in 1 Corinthians 14:19, just by the way. Now, Codex Bodmer II, that's Papyrus 66, shows some Syrian readings to be anterior to corresponding neutral readings around 200 AD. Now, listen to Colwell again. Colwell, quote, the Bodmer John, that's Papyrus 66, is also a witness to the early existence of many of the readings found in the Alpha text type, that's Hort Syrian, that's the Byzantine. Strangely enough to our previous ideas, the contemporary corrections in that papyrus frequently change a Byzantine reading to an Alexandrian reading, that's Hort's neutral. This indicates that at this early period, readings of both kinds were known and the Alexandrian were supplanting the Byzantine, which means that the Byzantine was earlier, right? At least as far as this witness is concerned. That's Colwell, end quote. Hosker, after his thorough 450, I showed you this the other day, study of Codex B, he offered this verdict. Quote, the maligned Textus Receptus served in large measure as the base which B tampered with and changed, end quote. Okay, the evidence from Papyrus 66 is decidedly inconvenient to the Hortian theory. The first hand has Byzantine readings, that a corrector later changed to Alexandrian. That means that the Byzantine was first. The Byzantine text type existed in 200 AD. 2 plus 2 equals 4. Going on, it is clear that Hort's characterization of the Syrian text as eclectic and secondary, as posterior to and building upon the Western and quote neutral text, does not square with the evidence. But while we're on the subject, what of Hort's 8 examples, the ones he did produce? Do they lend themselves to his interpretation? Well, we must ask whether, you have to first ask whether they really qualify as possible conflations at all. And then consider the reverse explanation, namely, that the shorter forms are independent simplifications of the original long form. That's a possibility, right? Going on, Bergen examined the 8 at length and observed that most of them simply do not exhibit the required phenomena. Now, the reader may see this. You can see this for yourself. Consulting any reasonably complete apparatus criticus, any Greek text, including mine. But all of them are included in my Appendix G in any edition of my Identity of New Testament text. You can get it free from my website, Prunch.org. Okay, whatever explanation may be given to the origin of the Byzantine readings in Mark 8:25, in Luke 11:54, Luke 12:18, they are not conflations, at least of the neutral and Western readings. This don't fit. The same thing may be said, though not quite so emphatically, about Mark 6:33 and Luke 9:10. Here's the point. In almost every case, the witnesses within the so-called neutral and Western camps are divided among themselves, so that a somewhat arbitrary choice has to be made in order to give, quote, the neutral or Western reading. Hort approached his discussion of the 8 examples of conflation he adduced, quote, premising that we do not attempt to notice every petty variant in the passage cited, for fear of confusing the substantial evidence, end quote. That was dishonest. Why? Because in a question of this sort, the confusion must be accounted for. If the neutral witnesses disagree among themselves, what credence can we give to the neutral witness of testimony as a whole? You're going to talk about that. Okay, given an instance such as Luke 24:53, where the required phenomena for conflation are actually present, it must be demonstrated that the 2 shorter readings did not arise through independent omissions of different parts of the longer reading, before it can be asserted that a conflation in fact took place. Apart from such demonstration, it is not fair to assume a conflation and then build a theory upon it. It's dishonest. Okay, get this. Towards total demonstration relative to Luke 24:53 is, quote, this simple instance needs no explanation, end quote. Oh dear. Bergen, who had personally collated Codex D as well as Aleph and B and C, he observed that in the last chapter of Luke, the received text has 837 words. And of those, Codex D omits merely 121, or 1 word in 7. To someone using the Nestle text of 24th edition is what I looked at the time, years ago. Codex D omits 66 out of 782, which is 1 in 12. Nestle omitted 38 words based on 1 Greek text. That's Codex D, and another 5 on D and Aleph. But going on now, in the face of such an inveterate propensity for omission, it is not unreasonable to suspect that in verse 53, that was all in this 1 chapter, Codex D has omitted, quote, and blessing from the original praising and blessing. That, rather than the reading of all but 6 of the extant Greek manuscripts, is a completion. In other words, 1,700 have the longer form and only 6 have shorter forms. So they're saying that 1,700 have a completion. But there's just one little detail, all right? The reading of D may easily have arisen from the Byzantine text by what we call homoioteliuton, that is similar ending. Both the verbs end in untes, the same sequence of letters. And I easily moves from one to the other, and you just miss it. Oh, Kilpatrick was one on recent members. I wrote this a long time ago. Scholars who have argued that at least some of Horst's territories are original. Kershaw Lake spoke of the problem of deciding which interpretation to take, that is, it's the longer or the shorter. Quote, the keystone of their theory is in the passages where we get this triple variation. And the point of the argument lies in the assumption that the longer reading is made by uniting the 2 shorter ones, not the 2 shorter by different dealings with the longer. That's right. This point can be tested only by an appeal to patristic evidence and general probability. That's Lake. Okay. He goes on, the latter argument is precarious because it's subjective. Okay. So that the ultimate and decisive criterion is patristic evidence. Oh, well, okay, Lake. So where is it? It appears, according to Lake, that patristic evidence is to decide the issue. All right, okay. But neither Lake nor anyone else has produced any patristic citations of these passages in the first 3 centuries. You have to wait until the 4th century. The few citations available after that, during the 4th century and on, all of them support the Byzantine readings, not the longer one, not the shorter one. So much for patristic evidence. Okay, I'm closing up. I'm getting toward the end. Actually, the whole matter of conflation is a pseudo issue. It's a tempest in a teapot. There simply are not enough putative examples to support generalization. They aren't there. Such evidence as we have, as there is, however, is certainly not unfavorable to the Syrian text. As Zuntz said, the idea that the late text was derived from the 2 earlier recensions combined is erroneous. Did you get that? Erroneous. Sturz has a chapter entitled Byzantine Western Alignments Go Back into the 2nd Century Independently and Originate in the East, not in the West. That's it. That's the name of the chapter. He makes heavy use of Zundt's work and concludes that, quote, Zundt's findings deal a devastating blow to Westcott and Hort's basic theory of the history of the text. That is, they destroy the supposed partial dependence of the K text as Byzantine on the Western sources. If this dependence in Byzantine Western alignments must be reversed, as Zunz demonstrates, then 1/2 of the support for Hort's basic theory of conflation collapses immediately. But not only does the Westcott-Hort theory fail at this point, it is changed into the opposite. That is more than the general consensus of scholarship can concede. Okay? The other side just can't handle that. It is an intolerable thought and too revolutionary to acknowledge that the Antiochian, that's the Byzantine text, may have been the source rather than the recipient of the common material in such Byzantine Western alignments. That's the end. That's Sturz. Yeah, the other side just can't handle it, right? Okay, I'm about to finish now, but I want you to listen carefully. I have not knowingly misrepresented either Zunz or Colwell or Metzger or Allant, etc., 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 in quoting from their works. I have not misrepresented them. I take it that Colwell does, in fact, or did, in fact, reject Hort's notion of genealogy. Allant did, in fact, reject Hort's notion of recensions. Zuntz did, in fact, reject Hort's notion of Syrian completion, and so on. They did. I quoted their words. However, I do not mean to imply, and it should not be assumed, that any of those scholars would have entirely agreed with me on my statement of the situation at any point, and they certainly do not agree with my total position. But if you've ever debated, you know that in debate, you use the other guy's arguments, right? It's good debate procedure. Okay, to conclude, in any edition of my book, The Identity of New Testament Text, it's gone through, the last several editions look like this. Before that, it looked like this, and so on. Then there are the little greenback ones, the bright green, yellow. Any edition of my book, except the very first one in 1977, the next one was in 80, 3 years later. There's a long appendix, about 20 pages, entitled Conflation or Confusion. And there I have demonstrated that Hort's use of conflation as an argument against the Byzantine text type was fraudulent. It was totally false. In fact, it was a tempest in a teapot. That's it for today. Thanks for watching.